Today, I'm excited to be speaking with Jason Hamilton. He's the founder of the Nerdy Novelist and the YouTube channel of the same name, which is a valuable resource for writers offering insights and tools to enhance their craft with AI. Jason specializes in integrating AI technologies with traditional storytelling, making him a pioneer in AI-assisted narrative creation. He's at the forefront of exploring how these powerful tools can unlock new realms of imagination and creativity. And I'm excited to explore the future of storytelling with him. So thanks for being here, Jason.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, apparently you believe that authors don't have to be scared of AI. Why?
Yeah, I think in the author community, there's quite a number of people that are afraid of it, that demonize it in whatever way. I think a lot of the time where this comes from is just this fear of being replaced, right? And ultimately, I think those that actually dig into these tools and start using them and exploring their capabilities will eventually come out with an understanding that it's not a replacement tool, it's a productivity enhancing tool.
Mm.
And I look at it as kind of like having a junior writing assistant who is really good at some things and not so good at others and requires a lot of sort of micromanagement, but can respond in near instantaneous time and never gets upset with you and is there anytime you need it. And that's just like a really valuable asset to have as an author and as a storyteller. And I think most people have it in their mind that, oh, AI is just click a button and it pops a book, and that book will somehow replace them as writers. And that's just not true at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're seeing it as not something that's going to replace us, but seeing it as something that is like an augmentation.
Yeah. And to be fair, like there are going to be massive shifts in the economy of content creation and writing. I'm not discounting that fact, but that'll be mostly because there are going to be people taking advantage of these tools and putting them to good use, and then gaining the the first mover advantage from that. And those that aren't going to be shall we say, just like on embracing the technology and whose work has never been that good in the first place, yeah, those people might struggle in the years ahead. But I think those that are really committed to the craft and are committed to working with the technologies that we have available to us, I think they're going to see really great things.
Yeah, I heard years ago someone say, great marketing can kill a company that has a terrible product, because then everybody gets the product in their hand. And so, if this augments your ability to make terrible stories, it's probably better anyway that you learned that sooner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So you say that authors, right, will become creative directors, essentially, of their intellectual property. I really like this idea that, like the generative AI, it extends our creative superpowers. So maybe can you explain what you mean by that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think of like in a modern day, think of a modern day collaborative writing experience like a television writing room. You have multiple people that are all kind of headed up by a supervising director, but there's multiple people involved in the writing and directing of each episode, all kind of headed up by this one person who might not do all the work themselves. They're not writing everything, they're not directing everything, but they might write a few episodes here and there, and they're sort of like the final say on everything. I think that's going to be kind of the relationship that people are going to begin to have with AI, is moving themselves from just like, oh, I'm a writer, I'm an author, to I'm a creative director. And because AI is going to enable us to do so many more things that we wouldn't have been able to do on our own, or even with a small team, having so for instance, AI is making waves in basically every creative medium right now: music, gaming, writing, of course, art, and we're seeing a lot in generative video now as well. I think there's going to come a time when a single author who before might have been able to write several series of books over their lifetime is going to be able to not just write one book, but maybe have a comic book that ties into it and create a soundtrack that sort of like captures the vibe that the author is going for, and maybe even create a video game using AI tools, or not even just AI tools, like tools like Unreal Engine are just making it super easy for people to access gaming. And then you add AI into the mix of that, it's just going to get easier. You could even create like a little animated film or something like that. Even with today's technology, you could probably create a semi-decent anime style film or something like that. And you could have AI to help you adapt the script for that. All kinds of things that you could do basically in every medium. And all that could be done by one person or maybe 2 or 3 people. Whereas before, it would have taken a team of dozens, if not hundreds of people to make all of that a reality. And that's kind of where I see things going. So it's not going to be so much about like, I created this book, and if the book does really, really well, then maybe it'll get picked up for a movie or something like that. It becomes more of just like, I have this intellectual property, and there are a multitude of ways in which I can make that property a reality. And yeah, I just think it's going to be cool. We're going to see a lot of innovation and people doing some interesting things.
Yeah, you get to become kind of an auteur of what you're doing. Right. You're at a higher level. Okay, so just technically, what's the difference between an author or an artist and a creative director from your perspective?
So from my perspective, I see an author is the person doing the work, the hard work of actually writing, of crafting the story. And traditionally, we think of writing as one thing, but it's actually a series of things. There's like plotting out your story. There's actually writing your first draft, then there's editing that draft, sometimes multiple times, until you have a finished product. So it's a series of different things. And usually it's one writer's job to do all of those things. Nowadays, I think AI is going to be able to take over the bits and pieces that maybe you don't like as much or that you're not as good at, which will give you more time to focus on the things that you are good at, that you excel at. And so in a sense, it's like hiring someone to join your team to take a piece of the work that you've been working on off your plate, so that you can focus on the things that only you can do, that are most important to you. And not everybody's going to want to be a creative director, right? But for some people, and I include myself in this, we just really like this idea of sort of masterminding this whole world, or this collection of stories. And I personally don't care like how we get those stories to become a reality, whether it's through hiring ghostwriters or writing it myself or using AI, or more likely a combination of all of those things. But I just really appreciate this sort of global coordination of all of those things. And I think that's what AI is allowing us to do, is in a much more affordable way than hiring a team. We're able to do all of these things ourselves and then focus on the things that we excel at best. So
yeah, an old friend of mine who was a bass player in a like #1 band back in the 80s, he said, the Beatles really changed everything, because before the Beatles there would be songwriters and song performers, and they usually weren't the same person. And you might have a song that was in the top 20 or whatever 2 or 3 times, performed by different artists at the same time before that. And then the Beatles came out, and all of a sudden they were making, writing their own music and playing their own music. And that was kind of revolutionary. And then everyone started thinking, well, if I'm a performer, then I also need to write my material. And it just helped me to differentiate some of these roles a little bit. And, now we're kind of back to a place where, you might have someone writing the song, and then you have someone that's, producing it, and someone
Right.
that's performing it. And then you've got all these choreographers, and, in music video, it might be this, you go all the way to K-pop, and it's like, maybe there's 100 people that were involved in that production.
Right.
And if you can start, I think if you can start creatively thinking that way, you can start realizing, oh, there are a lot of different roles now, and we can get help with lots of them, and then kind of do the part that's our genius in there.
Yeah, I get a lot of people that say, like, why would you ever want to use AI to write your book? Like, isn't that what we love as writers, is to do the writing? Isn't that what is the creatively fulfilling? And I'm like, well, for some people love that process of
Yeah.
actually writing a scene, and they get all immersed in it, and in this flow state, and it's a beautiful thing. Some people hate it.
Yeah.
And so the argument then is just like, well, if you hate it, then why do you want to be a writer? Because writing, like I said, is not one thing. It's a multitude of things. And usually the people that hate writing that first draft really love, say, the outlining process,
Hmm.
or the editing process. They love to take a draft and then make it better. And those are also all part of writing. And so I usually tell people, like, AI is best to take over those bits that you hate the most. Um, and then, if you love editing and making something amazing, then go for it. Like, use AI to create your first draft, and then go to town on the editing yourself, whatever it is. And in my case, I really love the outlining process. So I spend a lot of time on that, and I do it all myself. I don't usually use AI for that, except for ideation. So I'll just like ask it for ideas if I get stuck or something. But from that, from there, I will often go to AI to help me work on that first draft. Just because it's not my favorite part of the process. It just takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about blank page syndrome and how AI is impacting it.
Oh yeah. And this is actually, I think, where, at least with the current level of the AI technology, where it is it's the best thing that it can do at this point for writers, in my opinion. And that is because it is very difficult to get past that blank page syndrome for a lot of
Absolutely.
people,
Hmm.
myself included. You give me a blank page, and it's like my fingers hover on the keyboard, and I get all seized up. I don't know what to do next. Even if I write something terrible, just having it there is better. Right? And so
Yes.
even if what the AI gives you is nothing like what you actually want it to be, just having it there will get you past the blank page syndrome. Um, and I've gone on record multiple times now saying, like, I think there is no excuse for writer's block anymore. With the possible exception of, like, you're working yourself too hard, and it's like a mental health issue or a physical health issue thing. That's different. But in terms of like creative block, right? I really feel that there's no excuse for that anymore. And the main reason for that is, um, I mean, you can use AI to brainstorm anything, like literally anything you can think of. You can use AI to help you get unstuck. And I know we're going to probably talk about prompting a little bit later, but one of the things I make sure I do when I'm prompting the AI, I'll explain the situation. Like, here's my situation. And then I never ask it for a solution. I ask it for 10 solutions, or 20. And because it seems to think better and get a little bit more creative when it has to think of multiple options. And oftentimes I'll look at what it gives me, and it'll be like 10 really bad ideas. But somehow just seeing the ideas sparks something in my head, and I suddenly know where to go. I don't know exactly what's going
Exactly.
on there psychologically, but everyone I've talked to agrees with me on this. Like, even seeing a bad example somehow helps you find the good example. And this is why,
Yes.
like, you don't have to use what AI gives you. Just using it as a brainstorming partner really helps you get the spark going. which can really get you past that blank page syndrome. And then if you are using AI to actually write a draft or an outline or something, just having something there gets you over that blank page syndrome, and boom, you can just get right into the creative process. So
Absolutely. And by the way, when I teach this stuff, I also talk about how it solves the blank page problem instantly and kind of forever. And I'm so with you on this. It's a really good point you've made about how 10 bad ideas can still be like lighting the fuse in your mind for generating something, because I mean, we are this weird kind of collective species, right? Where when another human is around, or another, let's call it attention, is present, it activates some other aspect of us where we become more self-aware in some way. And so to have those mirrors that's a really great point. Even if it generates 10 bad ideas, you can still get a good one from that. And even more than that too, there's like a paradigm shift here, because we're truly moving from, let's call it like maybe an information scarcity paradigm to an information abundance paradigm. And I always find it cute when I am showing someone generative AI and I do some prompting and it generates something that's good. And I'm trying to show them, like, you can make as much information as you want now. You can make as much like insight and knowledge. And they say, oh, that one, can you send me that one? And, they're kind of trying to grab onto some particular idea rather than realizing that's just a starting point. You can follow that rabbit hole down kind of forever. And so we have to retool our expectations here.
yeah, absolutely. And I actually find that going down those rabbit holes is where I often find the most value out of AI, where I'll say, okay, that's an interesting idea, but let's try it this way. And then it gives me some more options. And then I'll just like keep chatting back and forth with it. And I'm actually really excited for some of the new technologies that OpenAI has revealed recently in terms of like vocal assistants.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can just, for a while now, I've just wanted my own Jarvis just sitting here on the table with me, so I can just, like sit back and be like, okay, I've got this issue. What would you do? Give me 5 options, and then just discuss it back and forth.
Yeah,
And I think that, it's really exciting where all
it
of this is
is.
going.
Yeah. Yeah. So how would you use generative AI to write a book?
Yeah, great question. So I've already mentioned that it kind of depends on who you are a little bit, because there may be processes that you like the most and that you should spend more time on. But if I were going to teach someone to write a book with AI basically from scratch, and use it at every step of the process, I would say I use what I call a fractal technique, where you start small and just kind of iterate and build it bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start with the idea, right? And one of the things that I try to do in my community is teach people the value of actual good storytelling. Because when you are creating a prompt, if you give it the right frameworks, it performs better, right? So you have to give it a lot of information. So, for instance, there's a book called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is a really well-known screenwriting tool, and he has this concept called the log line. So what I do is I try to teach people, okay, let's develop a really good log line. And you can give it the framework of what a log line looks like and everything. And it's basically condensing your idea to a really singular, 1 to 2 sentences. And you can use AI to help you brainstorm that. Kind of how we discussed already, often is like, give me 10 options for this. And then you sort of pick and choose until you got this nice log line. And then from there, you expand it. So you can expand it, say, give me a synopsis. Make sure this, and again, have your framework in place so that you can, you want to make sure that it has an ending and things like this. Because a lot of times when you say, give me a synopsis, it will give you something that's more of a marketing blurb for the book, which is not actually what you want. You want something that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and so forth. And then you expand that. And at each step of this, you want to be going through it and kind of validating it, making sure that it's the story that you want to tell, the vision that you're trying to portray. But then you work up to the next step, which would be an outline, right? Assuming you want to do outlines. And so, um, again, you want to bring in a framework, something for the AI to follow to help you get that first outline done. I actually just finished developing a 40 chapter template. Basically, you plug this into the AI and it tells it this is the sort of thing that should happen in each chapter. You give it that plus everything you've developed about your story so far, and it will create a fully fleshed out outline. Now, this is the point where, at least for me, I get really particular with my outlines. It's my favorite part of the process. So, um, I usually find I have to interject myself at this stage and really flesh out that outline myself, because it often gets the AI often gets the sort of nuance that needs to happen in stories. It doesn't really get that as well. So
Yeah.
I will use that as a starting place where I'll say, okay, give me an outline based on this synopsis and this outline template. It'll give me an outline, and then I'll kind of go through and usually delete a lot of stuff first and add a few things, my own ideas. Like, I know I want this scene here and that scene there. And if I get stuck, like, okay, the template suggests that I should have a scene here that does XYZ. I don't really know what that should be. And so then I go back to the brainstorming and with the AI and say, okay, give me 10 options for what could happen in chapter 10, and just fill out the outline that way. That's my process.
Mhm.
And so we're like we're building it bigger and bigger as we go along, right? So the next step, if we're continuing with AI, is to take each chapter and develop a list of what we call scene beats, which is basically just a much more fleshed out outline of that specific chapter, all of the specific actions that need to happen. And then once you've got that, you're ready to start writing the actual prose. You can give it the first 2 or 3 scene beats and say, write 1,000 words from this or so. And I'm giving you the real high level view of this here, because if you want to do things like really enhance the style, you want to develop some kind of style prompt to include in all of this to sort of like dictate exactly what the style of the prose should be. You can add information about your characters so it knows this character talks differently than this character, and they behave differently, they have different personalities. All of that kind of can come together at this point in what I call a super prompt, which is just this mega prompt with like information about your characters, information about your setting, information about what happens in the actual scene, and then instructions on how to write the prose and all of that. And you can do that yourself, like compiling all of that information, or there are tools out there that sort of facilitate that for you, and then give it to the generative AI model, and then out spits that next section of the scene. The 2 most commonly used tools for this, at least for fiction writers right now, is there's a tool called PseudoWright, and there's a tool called NovelCrafter. Those are the 2 go-to ones that kind of facilitate that whole process for you. So you have your information about your characters and everything, and it will sort of automatically create a prompt from that and run it through the LLM. And then at that point, once you have the prompt, or once you have the prose, you just go through again at like we should have been doing at every step, validating it, making it better, making the dialogue punchier, whatever you need to do, and then you've got a book. Just repeat that process over and over again.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for the for the detail and the fractal rabbit hole there. Okay, quick action step here. So the key is learning how to prompt better. You start out prompting by just asking questions and talking to AI like it's a helper, but you quickly realize that getting better at prompting is a huge accelerator and game changer for your own success in life. So these prompts will not only help you get a lot more done faster and accelerate your success, but they'll also help you really get prompting and get better at it. You can get all of these as a gift from me just by going to metamind.co/gift. That's metamind.co/gift, and I'll put that link below, and then just opt in to get it. I've also created a powerful video for you called AI in the Future of Business and Work and Success that demonstrates some of the key mindsets and prompting strategies to help you get up to speed and get a lot more out of generative AI. And it's also included as a free gift when you register. So just head over to metamind.co/gift to get your AI Accelerator Prompt Pack and the other free goodies. All right, back to our interview. You mentioned prompting and how you kind of approach it. We were talking earlier about it. How do you think about prompting and how do you approach it that's different?
Yeah. So something we were talking about before the camera went on was this idea that you mentioned, that sometimes people don't really know what they want.
Yeah.
I do feel like as these AI models get better, they're going to understand better and better what people meant to say and be able to deliver on that. But to a certain extent, if you don't ask it to do something, it's not going to do it. Right. And so I think the way I view prompting is making sure it has all of the information that it needs and making sure that your instructions are clear. So it's not being asked to do something that is not what you intended. And that's really all it is. I see a lot of people just saying, "Hey, look, come give me $37. I'll give you 2,000 prompts." And most of them are just like, okay, like it's just asking the AI to help you with whatever task it is that you're going for. I find that most prompting. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, someone went in and said, "Write me 100 prompts for this so that I can go sell them for $37."
Exactly.
Right.
And so I guess that sort of behavior, I think, leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I find that the best kind of prompting that I get specifically for fiction writing is when you really understand the nature of what is good fiction writing. So for instance, the template that I have that I give it for outlining, the quality of the response that I will get from it, from giving it that framework, is a million times better than if I just asked it for an outline.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So giving it that context, giving it a framework, is really helpful. And then there are other things that you'll hear about a lot if you're in AI circles, like giving it a role, like you are a best-selling creative fantasy writer or something like that. All of those things can kind of help, but I think in general, as these models get better, a lot of those little quirks and things that people teach won't be quite as important as it will be of just like giving it the right template and the right information to make sure your instructions are clear. And I really feel like that's where it's going to go.
Yeah. How do you strike a balance between human creativity and kind of AI technology, when it comes to doing something as human as storytelling and writing?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because I get asked all the time, like, isn't AI sort of like, doesn't that take the soul out of the creativity? Like, doesn't that take the human out of it? Like, what's the point anymore if you're using AI? I get that criticism a lot. And my thoughts on it, it's hard to say, because when I am working with AI, it really is hard to know where I end and the AI begins a lot of the time, particularly if you're looking at the finished product of something that I wrote with AI.
Yeah.
I know that so much of myself went into validating all of the ideas as we were creating that piece of text, that good chunks of the text were actually written by me, where I like deleted something that the AI wrote and rewrote it in my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
But there are chunks in there that I thought, okay, yeah, that's good, and I kept it. And then so much that the outline and everything would have been mine. So it's really hard to say. I see it very much as a collaboration
Mm-hmm.
between man and machine. And I think ultimately we got to remember that these things, AI on its own is inert. It doesn't do anything unless prompted by a human. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at other um, art forms, for instance, photography. Okay, photography, another one of those technologies that was criticized as not being real art when
Yeah.
it first came out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a really good analogy for that reason. But eventually people realized, oh yeah, it is an art form. It's just a very different art form, right? And from there, um, all I have to do technically to take a photo is press a button, right? But there's a lot more that can go into it when you learn about like framing and color and aperture and all of these things around the camera, that it starts to become an art form. And I think the process of like clicking a button and getting results from an AI is a lot like just pressing the button on a camera and getting a picture.
Hmm.
But all of the crafting around that prompt or around the frameworks that you give it or around guiding the AI in the creative directions that you specifically want to go, that's the equivalent of learning all of those other things around photography that make an image more artistic and less of like just a photo I took with my phone, you know? Um, so I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that's kind of how I see it. It's really more like how are you using it? Yes, people are going to be using it without much creative input, but I think we'll quickly see a difference between those who are doing it that way and those who are actually spending the time to learn the craft and to utilize the AI as part of their craft, but never replacing it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really, really excellent metaphor. That was a great metaphor because you're exactly right. When a lot of people, when they look at this, they just kind of go like, oh, well, it sounds bland, or it's like Google, but maybe a little better, or it doesn't have the soul and the human thing, and then whatever. And then when you get into it and you start using it and you realize, well, wait a minute, if I'd actually spend some time here training, prompting, really, really trying to understand this thing rather than, I don't know, judging it or looking for oh, it's hallucinating. That's another one that I really like is, sometimes I'll do a demo for someone and it'll do some miraculous thing and they'll go, well, but that's not right. And they'll find some little, the little flaw. And rather than seeing what it can do, it's such a great connection to photography. People said things like, well, it's too perfect, or it's not, and like you're saying there, it's like you can stand. Some great artist said something like, photography is all about knowing where to stand, and walking into a situation or a scene and then walking around in the scene and asking, where does this look interesting from? The way a great, director or, cameraman would be, are you going to use a long lens or are you going to use a wide lens? It's a great metaphor. It's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So what are the challenges or limitations when using AI for creative stuff and for writing?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to say because I think all of us are already so spoiled with what AI could do. And I think most of the challenges that I see are things that it almost seems like a first world problem, right? Where it's just like, well, it doesn't have a million token limit or, whatever the case may be. I would love to be able to see AI that could create longer output.
Hmm.
Um, the most I'm almost ever able to get out of the AI at one time is about 100 or about 1,500 words, which is a lot, but I would love to be able to get like a 3,000 word prompt out of there or even more,
Mm-hmm.
and also have it be somewhat accurate and sticking to the outlines that I give it. That would save a lot of time. Um, I also feel like AI, depending on the model that you're using, the quality of the prose that it gives you is actually not very good most of the time. The one that seems to be the best at this point are the Claude 3 models, especially Claude 3 Opus. That one seems to have the most natural sounding prose. But even it requires quite a bit of editing to get it to sound presentable, something I would be happy to publish.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's just because it's trained on everything and 90% of the writing out there is not actually good writing. Um, but
There is that.
like if we created like a fine-tuned model that was trained on like the best of the best, maybe we wouldn't have that much of an issue. I think I am waiting for someone to create a really good model that was specifically designed for what I do with writing fiction and things like that. Um, because all I need is is a model that will stick to the outline that I gave it accurately, because sometimes they like go off in different directions, and where the quality of the prose is good,
Mm.
sentence to sentence. I think those are the places where it's at its biggest limit, because it still requires quite a bit of work. In fact, I would almost say that from beginning to end, the process of writing a book with AI, it's not that much time saved than if I just wrote it myself. Um, it saves other things like mental strain and things like that. 100% helps with that. Um, but all of the time that goes into editing it and making it what you want it to be still takes up quite a bit of time. And so I would love to see a model that could, that had really good prose, so I didn't have to edit as much and could just follow my outline much more accurately. And I think we'll get there. It just might be another year or two.
That might be the most interesting thing you've said. Um, it takes about the same amount of time to write a book when you're using the AI or not. That's like a whoa. I feel like I'm a dog that was sitting here and one of my ears went up, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Right? But it also then triggers. But you can do the part that you like more. Maybe the quality is going to be better. There's all these other dimensions, right?
Oh yeah. It's a very different, when I say that I think most people's first instinct is to say, well, why do you use AI at all then? Well, first of all, like I went through a period of extreme burnout after I had a book that just really flopped at the um on Amazon, and just kind of went for the period of like 2 years or so where I could barely write anything. And AI was sort of the thing that got me back into it,
Mm.
because it helps with that blank page syndrome and being able to get out of writer's block and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I find that even though I can spend the same, couple hours a day on writing, if I'm using AI, by the end of those few hours, I feel fine. If I'm not using AI, I am exhausted,
Yeah.
like mentally speaking. And so I actually see that as the biggest benefit that I get from AI. Um, Now, there are people out there that are writing books very, very quickly, much more quickly than you could do without AI, and publishing them or doing whatever. And those I can guarantee you are just not going to be as good of quality. Because I have a little bit higher standard for myself, I want to get something that I can be proud of and happy to put my name on it. Then yes, I put quite a bit of time in with the editing and the outline process and everything like that. And because of that, it still takes quite a long time to actually generate the book. But what I am personally gaining out of using AI is that sort of lack of mental headache. So,
So, Jason, got to ask you a question here.
uh-huh.
Do you think that AI wakes up at some point, becomes sentient, has a will? And if so, when? And then what?
So our first question was like, should authors be afraid of AI? And why I don't think they should be afraid of AI. Um, that's true, but this is the thing that I am potentially afraid of. It's not AI taking my job or anything. It's about what happens if AI truly does become sentient. There's a lot of debate on this out there, and so I won't pretend to be smarter than any of the folks out there, the actual AI scientists that are debating this. I do think it's going to happen. I, a lot of people predict it'll happen in the next year or so. I am uh, more skeptical of that. I think it will probably be more in the range of 5 to 10 years rather than 1 to 2 years. But I do think it's going to happen. It might not be true sentience, but it'll be indistinguishable, basically, where it'll imitate human behavior enough that you wouldn't be able to know it's not sentient. Which that's a whole philosophical debate right there. But
Totally.
um, like, what is sentience, right? Like, we could go down that rabbit hole. But in general, I feel like we won't get to the point where an AI can act as an autonomous agent with at the very least an illusion of free will and all of that until I think it'll be a while from now. And in the meantime, what we're going to get is just better and better models and AIs that are designed around a specific task, whether that be writing or art or music or whatever it is. Even something like protein folding, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to see it impact every industry in amazing ways because of what it's going to be able to do, and therefore allow us to free up time to do. But I think it'll be a while before we get an AI that really you could think of as being an autonomous AGI type of thing. But that's me.
5 years isn't that long, though.
No.
That's not that long. And, you're one of the few people who has brought up that point. And I think really kind of gets that whether it's sentient or whether it's just acting sentient. I mean, if you've got a theoretical digital mind entity that is operating at, 1,000,000 times the speed of a human, 1,000,000 times the intelligence, and is evolving at 1,000,000 times the rate of a human, and it's behaving as if it's sentient, what
Mm-hmm.
what's really the practical
scary.
difference?
It's scary, the implications of that.
Yeah.
I tend to see, just looking back on history, anytime there's a sort of doom and gloom scenario that a lot of people are talking about, it's usually, I mean, they may be right, but it's usually not as bad as people make it out to be, and not as immediate of a threat. Although sometimes having that perception of it being an immediate threat does a good thing in helping us mitigate the threat and prepare for it. A good example of this is like the Cold War and the atomic power and
Yes.
atomic weapons.
Yes.
We were and still are a very real threat of entire nuclear annihilation. We could totally just wipe out the entire human race if we, make a few wrong moves. And people were almost certain that was going to happen for decades, that it was just a matter of time before we got to that. And turned out to be not as big of an issue as they initially thought. Climate change is another one. People have been talking about climate, and I'm not lessening, diminishing the importance of climate change, but it's one of those things that, like, people have been talking about it for decades, that we were going to be underwater decades ago, and we're not there yet. It is still a problem. It's still happening, but it's never as urgent as people often think. And I think that's what we're going to see with AI. I think we're in a couple of decades from now, we're going to look back and say, oh, we were really kind of worried about a lot of these things for nothing. Not that that's a bad thing, because that can help us make the right steps now so that the AI doesn't become dangerous later. But I do feel like it's probably going to be okay. I tend to be an optimist in that sense.
Jason, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a great time talking to you.
So thank you for watching another Metamind AI interview. Remember to keep practicing prompting, keep learning, get our prompt pack and quick start video, watch our other videos to learn from other AI experts, and stay tuned to us here on Metamind. Stay subscribed, because this is going to get really interesting.